If you make your way into the auditorium, we're going to begin our final presentation of the day. So I hope you all felt that last presentation was an ideal presentation for after lunch. Worked out well, yes. How many of you were here last year? Quite a few. Did any of you remember the presentation after lunch last year? A little bit? Yeah, that one provoked some excitement too, just not of the kind I anticipated. But yeah, that was an interesting talk too. So we're going to try to keep picking talks after lunch that do that. So it kind of keeps our momentum going through the day. Okay. We'll certainly touch base about this briefly after the final presentation, but again, for those of you that are here for CEUs, after the last presentation, just come on up to the front registration desk. For those of you that have paid either before the conference or today, if you've paid today, we have your CEU certificates ready for you. If you decide you want to pay for your CEUs today still, you can do that by check, and we'll be set up for you there too, again, at the front registration desk. So, well, why don't we get started? Our final presentation, it's on a topic that we've revisited a few times over the years, and based on the audience response and also just the importance of it, and it is really focusing on dementia, the spiritual dimension. And I'm really thrilled to have Pastor Curt Seefeldt here, the Director of Church Relations from the Lutheran Home Association. They've really pioneered, I think, the integration of spirituality and innovation and long-term care. And I'm really excited to hear about some of his insights and some of his thoughts related to this key topic when we're talking about maintaining personhood, maintaining quality of life for people with memory loss. So, Curt? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joe. So glad you are here. Again, it's still a beautiful day, as Judy reminded us. So glad that you're here and you stuck around for the entire day. This is really great. We're going to close this presentation here today by focusing on dementia, the spiritual dementia. I need to get closer to this. I'm sorry. And I'm glad I'm where I'm at in the speakers' agenda here today, because we're going to build on what Judy had talked about on focusing on the abilities, on the positives, and also especially following up on Mindy and all of her talk about collaboration. That's really key, and that's very key when we're talking about what we're on the spiritual side of things. I'm going to ask a couple of questions here before we start. How many of you are here and you're clergy, chaplains, or you're somehow involved with a faith community as a volunteer working with people with dementia? Would you raise your hand? Not too many. Okay. How many of you here are personal care partners, where you're taking care of someone in your family or loved one? Raise your hand, most of you. And then how many of you are professional care partners, caregivers? Okay, we're going to try and get the latter two together today and talk about how we can integrate that. And I'm kind of glad I don't have a lot of professional clergy here, because I don't have a lot for them. So that's good. The other thing I want to do today is I want to thank you. All of you are a gift from God to the people that you're taking care of. And I want you to go home today understanding and recognizing that as a calling. I'm going to talk today, and I have to make a confession. I'm not Mindy. I'm not going to wear a hat, but I hope I give you something at least as valuable. A little bit about me. I've been a parish pastor for 27 years, last 10 years with the Lutheran Home Association, some of that as a chaplain. Right now I actually work with our donors. I suppose I could be called a fundraiser. I don't like the phrase. You don't like the phrase, the title either. but I do work with people that support our ministry. This is my wife and our 2 grandchildren. We have 3 sons, and been blessed with this as of my family as well as my profession. Today we want to talk about appreciating the spiritual needs of those with memory care. And the very fact that it's a topic today means that sometimes maybe it's the one thing that sometimes is forgotten, especially, or maybe it's that elephant in the room kind of topic that we don't know how to deal with, especially when we get into public care settings, facilities, assisted living, memory care, and the like. We also want to learn about communication when communication is difficult. Now that's something, again, Judy did a great job of explaining, and so did Mindy, gave us some examples. And then we'll talk about techniques and resources that are particularly valuable for people with dementia. I just wanted to bring a quote here from, spirituality includes the need for ultimate meaning in each person, whether this is fulfilled through relationship with God or some other sense, a sense of another, or whether some other sense of meaning becomes the guiding force within the individual's life. Human spirituality also involves relationship with other people. Spirituality is part of every human being. It is what differentiates humans from other animal species. I look at it maybe another way, as spirituality deals with questions. I like to keep things simple. But the questions of who am I, why am I here, where am I going, what's my source of joy or happiness or comfort or blessedness or peace or love? You can choose your words, your phrase. What's my source of contentment or my certainty about eternity? That's what we're talking about. What about my relationship to myself and other people? It's about my relationship to the creature world. And ultimately, many of us would talk about what is it about my relationship with God. And if these are questions that you and I have, the question is, does this become irrelevant when people have dementia? And if the answer is no, this is very relevant, the question is next, how do we go about meeting those needs? How can we do that? And how can we provide a spiritual benefit to everybody involved in this relationship? Family members, staff in the facility, the church family, the faith community family. This is my mom, and I want to just talk a little bit about our story. My mom died last September at the age of 98. She lived in our assisted living facility, and for the last 12 months, you kind of knew every time you turned the calendar, this might be the last page that she sees. My family is close. My brothers and sisters and their children, my children, made a concerted effort to get over to see Mom. And so there was just a lot of support. We had talks. Talks about my dad. He died in 2007. And we talked about her getting to see him. My faith community, we talk about that place as heaven. And so we talked about her going there. Oddly enough, as she went along, she ended up with many more dreams about relatives that had passed away. She was the last of her generation. I didn't mention that. And but the most vivid dream was with a sister-in-law, not my father. And that sister-in-law had been gone for a long time, over 20 years. But I know during my childhood, this was Mom's closest friend, and she would wake up having conversations with her. And I said, Mom, you're just getting ready for the family reunion. We were able to talk about that. We also talked a little bit about God's forgiveness, gave her the assurance that this was going to be her place. Again, in my faith community, that forgiveness is based on Jesus and his life and death for us, his resurrection from the dead that gives the power to his promise that we're going to rise to. And we talked about that. And it suddenly hit me as we were having these conversations. You know, Mom had this talk with me, my grandfather died. I was 8 years old. And the thought is, what a privilege for me to give back to her what she had given me. The other thing is I witnessed her strength, her conviction about dying, certainty of going to be in heaven. She did have trouble, though, with the whole dying process. What's that going to be like? Going to be difficult. And so I told her, Mom, that's okay. You've never died before. It's okay to be a little bit scared about that. Yeah. And she smiled too. She did. But again, I witnessed her strength, her inner strength, and that gave me strength. September 15th was the day she took a turn. And something wasn't right already in the morning. By late afternoon, I was calling my family after talking with the nurse who said, I think we're looking in no more than weeks. If you want to tell your family to get here for a conversation with your mom, maybe they should know. And I called them all that afternoon, and then after supper, I called them all back, and I said, you better leave as soon as possible. My oldest sister arrived on Friday. My brother from Wyoming arrived on Saturday. My other sister had been on vacation and was able to get there Sunday. And we all came together. Our children came together, our grandchildren came together, my nieces and nephews. And we had some great days. Again, she was in a facility, so her physical needs were being very well taken care of. Thankful for their skill. We had hospice for over a year, and the comfort measures were all there. But we as family were able to focus on that spiritual element. And so people would sit down with her, even though she was sleeping much of the time, praying with her, sharing Bible verses. And then Sunday, she had a lucid moment, and we got in there, and we had about a dozen people, 3 generations of her family, singing every hymn we could come up with. And then we tried to sing one non-religious hymn, and she gave us this, or non-religious song. She gives this dirty look. So we figured it out. She wanted us to keep up with the hymns. And 2 days later, she died on a Tuesday. And reflecting on it, again, 3 things. One is the privilege that I had to be able to serve my own mother and to meet her needs, her spiritual needs. Number 2, the privilege I had is to see her strength. And many times when you serve people and you think you're serving them, you come away and say, they've given me more than I think I ever gave them. And then finally, the blessing it was for my family to gather. And some of those were children. I think the youngest was about 7th or 8th grade. And I'm sure for this individual, it was the first time been around a person who was dying. And I think that's an important thing. Our society tends to mass death. That's a whole another thing for me to talk about, a tangent. But the way it brought our family together to take care of our loved one. As you may have guessed, my mom did not have dementia. She had some, I suppose, mild cognitive impairment related to her congestive heart failure. But I think we've got these takeaways that when we talk about the spiritual dimension of caregiving, and I didn't get this slide in your presentation there, but to think of it as a calling to bring comfort. Again, this calling can have a lot of fun, like Mindy was showing us here, but it's a very high privilege to be doing this. To learn from the experiences. You see the folks that you're dealing with, their wisdom, their confidence, their inner strength. And then the blessing for families. I've become, very strong on the idea that maybe the reason God gives us challenging situations, be it dementia, be it a child born with a disability, be it that sudden phone call where you've lost somebody. Maybe the reason God gives us those things is to help us really understand what's important, and that's love. That we have that love for one another. And we've got a world that sort of takes us away from that in so many different directions with all kinds of entertainment and all kinds of goals and things that can occupy our time. But the most fulfilling thing that we can do is to truly love one another. And so we're going to look at some ways in which we can do that. Some observations, and the first thing I want to say is that when you figured out one person with dementia, you figured out exactly one person with dementia. We can generalize, and you can say, that isn't working for me, and that's okay. Or you can say, this works for me, and it works for nobody else. That's right. I've always felt that the best people to work with people with dementia are people who love to solve puzzles. Because it's a puzzle. And it's trial and error. And don't quit when something didn't work. I love Mindy's And the neat thing about that technique is when you find something that works once, it's going to work again, right? Chances are. So if you've got some little bit of mild memory loss, write it down so you don't forget it, because if you can use it once, go back to it again and again. Some of the observations I'm going to share kind of is based on a little bit of this video. And it talks about the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And of all the things that are out there, it's the best thing I've seen to explain what you're seeing, especially with the dementia that's caused by Alzheimer's.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination, and in the very last stage, It destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
Okay, the takeaway from that video is when we're working, especially with people with dementia from Alzheimer's, 90% of people with the dementia that's caused by Alzheimer's are going to show as their first symptom that short-term memory loss. And we call this conference Caring for a Person with Memory Loss, but we all realize something about that memory loss. It's not all-encompassing, is it? There's a lot of memories that are there. The person has not stopped being a person, and the person has not really lost their personality. There's sometimes some personality changes, but the memories that are there, been there all along, are still there, many of them. And again, they decline over time, but if we look at it from, well, like Judy was pointing out this morning, from the standpoint of what abilities remain, that's the thing that we can work with. The second thing in the video is that it points out that often language is a problem. And why is that? Well, language is a pretty complex process, isn't it? How long is it before you can have a conversation with a child? Maybe age 4 on average, if that's pretty fair. And think of all of the energy that goes into getting that language developed, how grandpa and grandma are trying to get them to say the first word, and mommy wants the child to say mommy first, and daddy wants the child to say daddy first. And then we bring even sometimes professionals and their teachers are involved. Language is a very complex process. And so it makes perfect sense that people with dementia start to lose their ability to communicate with language, doesn't it? I mean, that just makes sense. But even though they may find it difficulty to communicate with language, it doesn't mean that they stop listening and that they're not processing what they're hearing and processing their environment around them. Because truthfully, some people maybe can't talk, but some people just give up on talking because it's too hard, or maybe we're not doing a real good job of listening. We tune them out way too soon. I have a friend who has a son on the autism spectrum, and he said the one thing about autism that he learned is that a baby with autism takes like about 5, 6, 7 times longer to process an emotion than a person without autism. And he said the problem with young parents with that child with autism is that they give up. They'll try smiling, and they don't see a smile, and so they quit smiling. So you've got to keep at it a little bit longer. And in terms of language, we got kind of the same thing. So a couple of things we want to keep in mind. Memory loss associated with dementia frequently affects short-term memory, yet a great deal of long-term memory often remains. Memory loss associated with dementia frequently makes speech difficult, yet comprehension of what is heard often remains. Memory loss associated with dementia frequently affects cognitive ability, yet people with dementia experience a full range of emotions. And you see that, whether it's anger, anxiety, joy, contentment. And so these things that lead us to sort of a strategy. We know that people with memory loss often respect or respond to art therapy and familiar music. These are right-brained activities. And the cognitive side, which is what we're losing, is a left-brained activity. So that's why art and music make such a connection. That still remains. I could maybe make another analogy. Think of a newborn child. Emotion or cognitive ability? Which side of the brain do you see? It's all emotion, isn't it? The cognitive ability is extremely limited. Do you as a parent or a grandparent learn how to communicate with that child? Yeah. You learn their expressions, their cries. And so we've got the same tool to use with people as they progress into dementia. Not that they're going into a second childhood. They're adults. They lived a full life. They're our parents, our grandparents. We owe them that respect, so they're not children. The roles may be reversing, as has been mentioned, but we've got this tool if we can tap into the right side of the brain. And the other thing is that scientists tell us that our spiritual thoughts are processed in the same regions of the brain as art and music. So a comfort to us as we're trying to reach people spiritually is, yes, we can, because it doesn't depend so much on the cognitive process. Even people with short-term memory loss can sometimes develop new memories. I just remember a lady we had in our nursing home. She moved there, and about an hour before meals, she would show up and she would sit at her table. Don't tell me that she couldn't learn anything new. She got into new surroundings. She knew where she sat. She didn't have to be prompted. And that was where she would spend about an hour every day. That's what she liked to do. So we can develop new memories through, again, repetition. The other things that people can do is we can prompt them with rote speech. I've been doing presentations on this topic for about 5 years, and I've been always calling this muscle memory. And the example is Glenn Campbell. When he did his final tour, I was told that once in a while he would lose track of the words, but he never dropped a chord on the guitar. And truthfully, his fans didn't care if he lost track of the words. They were singing with him anyway, so it was good. But that's rote speech. And again, I called it muscle memory until a speech therapist said, no, that's not muscle memory. That's rote speech. We use it all the time. A person with a stroke goes into speech therapy, and we're going to start counting. That's rote speech because we can do it without thinking. We can sing the ABC song. I'll be a Mindy here. Come here and sing with me. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Great job. Did you think about it? No. See, that's rote speech. And if we can figure out what rote speech patterns are still in the mind of the people that we're trying to serve, we can often get them to sing. And why is that rote speech important? If you and I have a conversation, we go through a listening process, we go through a thinking process of formulating what our response is going to be, and then we have this whole mechanical process of our brain taking our breath, pushing it through our vocal cords, and everything in our mouth is shaping those words. And not to mention the fact that it has to be subject, verb, predicate. It's got to follow the rules of grammar that we learned. It's a very difficult process. But when we tap into rote speech, we don't have to think about it. It's almost automatic. The thing that I have to admit as a Christian is that when I pray the Lord's Prayer, I can do it without thinking, which doesn't make it much of a prayer, does it? Okay? But the blessing is that that Lord's Prayer might very much be embedded in the mind of the person I'm trying to serve, and that's why they can say it with me, even though they've gone well beyond any other speech. We've talked a little bit about validation. Naomi Feil is the validation therapy goddess. And if some of you who's heard of her, seen her stuff, maybe you've seen the video. If you haven't, she's really very good. And this video that demonstrates, puts her validation therapy into practice is a great example of what I'm trying to illustrate.
When people are very old and deteriorated and no one enters their world and they're just sitting there, they will withdraw inward more and more. And their desperate need for connection is all now inside. And if a person is all alone, even if they're very, very deteriorated, there's a longing for this kind of closeness. Mrs. Wilson? Hello. You want me to sit? Can you see me good? Gladys Wilson is a wonderful example of a person who is in the phase of repetitive motion, where people use movements, repetitive movements, because they don't have any more speech or very little speech, but they have human needs that need to be expressed. You're crying. Crying, you have a tear right here in your face. You have a little pain. You don't want me to touch you. You're very sad. Can you see me? Is it scary? Are you afraid? And if this person sits with their eyes closed, rocking back and forth, and maybe there's a tear coming down, there's a need there. There's a little tear that's coming out. Do you feel it? You feel a little tear? If you gently use touch, and I touched Gladys Wilson for the fingertips right here on the cheek, is where the mother usually touches a child. If you touch an infant there, it looks up, and every cell remembers where it was touched by the mother. And often that person knows, even if they can't say a word at that moment, they won't talk, or they don't want to talk, but there's a communication. And that person is no longer alone. Can you let me in a little bit? You think? Just a little? You think I could be with you and Jesus for a minute? Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I used music, because when speech is gone, music, especially with Gladys Wilson, it was religious music, because there's emotion tied to it and safety tied to it. So I used her old church songs. Jesus loves me, yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me, the Bible tells me so. What I did was, when she moved, I moved with her. And when I was singing, because she didn't sing with me, so I matched the intensity of my voice to the intensity of her movement. And pretty soon, for a split second, we became one person. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. So at one point, when she got very quiet and very peaceful, and my voice became very quiet as hers and very peaceful, and my breathing slowed to her breathing, she pulled me to her, and I moved with her. And for her, at that moment, I believe I was a symbol of her mom. feel safe and warm? Yeah? Can you see? He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got the mothers and the fathers. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hands. He's got the mothers and the fathers in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. The breakthrough doesn't happen every time. The person will not always open their eyes and look at you. But if you keep trying and you keep centering yourself and really look at that person and really mirror their movements, maybe not this time, but the next time you come, you'll have a communication. You feel safe. You feel safe? Yeah. With Jesus? Yeah. And me?
I do want to thank my friends at Memory Bridge. They're out of Chicago. They have given me this is copyrighted material, they've given me permission to use these in public presentations such as this. This was on public TV a number of years ago, and there is a DVD that you can buy the entire segment. What's available on there. This is not good. Joe! Yeah, the postpone doesn't, does somebody? Is that going to help? Am I done? Well, at least we got the video done.
You can say a prayer in the meantime or something.
Well, then we might get a lightning bolt.
I know. So I'm going to have to restart this. So.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Could I have a microphone so I need a microphone so I can.
Yeah, there might be a floating mic up there.
Is there, otherwise I'm going to just have to
Yeah, please do.
get a little close and personal here, Joe, sorry.
It's all right.
I'll just work off of the sheet there.
I might actually be able to do this faster than you thought.
Okay, good.
Okay.
But Naomi Feil is just this, the founder of validation therapy. And when you talk about validation, this video is a great video for seeing it in action. First of all, there we go, good. We'll come back to that now. So, some strategies is initiate communication. Sometimes people with dementia have just lost the ability or lost the interest in initiating the communication. And so, you could see Mrs. Wilson sitting in that Jerry chair. I'm told they are not legal anymore, right? Okay, restraint. But you can see people walking past her day after day after day after day. It's like she's invisible. And truthfully, she seemed to be pretty calm and contented. So maybe the temptation is, let's just not disturb her, because she may grab us by the collar or reach out. You don't know. But we see what happens when Mrs. Feil did what she did. Glad Naomi did that. By the way, I talked with her about this, and it's absolutely totally spontaneous. They were doing some filming in a facility, and they saw Mrs. Wilson there, and so obviously you can't script what happened. They just happened to have the equipment there to do it, to catch it. So initiate the conversation. Validation involves positioning yourself directly in front to give someone full attention. And I know you're going to lose the audio on this, but as a chaplain, I would often approach people, get down on one knee, be directly in front of them, turn my shoulders just a little bit because you don't want to be confrontational, but turn, and then I would reach out with my hand, palm up, and see what kind of response I would get. I didn't use Mrs. Files' technique of touching on the face. I just didn't feel comfortable with that. Also, as a male, I'm cognizant of the fact that some women may have not had a good experience with a male, and so there may be that in the background. So I wanted to approach very carefully, let the person respond. If they put their hand on mine, I would put the other open palm on top of their hand and then just see what would happen. And then I'd have my conversation. And usually it would be like Mrs. File, can I sing with you? And we'd sing a song. When you come to validation, the other thing is that you, like Judy said, with the example of, you stole my watch. You repeat it. You say, someone stole your watch. The same way that, use the same expression. You're recognizing not only the words, but the emotion with it. In the video, Mrs. File comes to her and says, I notice a tear. I see that you're sad. So she's expressing this emotion. And what a powerful thing that is when someone notices us and someone notices what we're feeling and puts it into words, especially if I can't put those things into words. Mrs. File is a master of mirroring the same facial features. And a couple of years ago, she spoke in Mankato, and she had me up on the stage. And I was supposed to pretend that I was very angry because I had dementia. I wanted to go out. And I was very loud and demanding, and I knew I was play acting. And she looked back at me with the same face that I had, and it melted me. It sent shivers down my spine to see what effect that had on me, because I just didn't believe, and I was just acting. And so mirroring that expression, not only the words, the emotion, the facial expression, to try to send that emotion back, it's just a very, very powerful tool. This video is on YouTube. You go back to that, Google it, it'll pop up. It's got millions of hits. And it's a great place to study validation. As far as trying to reach people spiritually, we always go to what's familiar. Songs. Again, why? Songs connect emotionally. Songs, sometimes people always say it should be children's songs because they seem to work. And I have a little different take on that. I think the reason children's songs work because there's a lot of repetition and we go back to rote memory. And what I've seen so often, when I love to use Jesus Loves Me, as Mrs. File does, and the thing is that you notice that there's about 3 verses that I use, and sometimes I get their attention on the first chorus, and the second chorus I start to see a little bit of clicking, and by the time I get to the 3rd verse with the 3rd chorus, they're singing along. But it takes some time for them to decide, possibly, for the memory to come. I don't know what's going on. But that's just been my experience. Very familiar prayers. If that has been a person's pattern, mealtime prayers, bedtime prayers, and maybe that hasn't been their pattern so much as an adult, but if that's what they said when they were younger, I didn't include it in my story about my mom. Again, she taught me the now I lay me down to sleep prayer. And when she was a little nervous about dying, we started to pray that prayer because it includes the words, if I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Okay, and so that could work very well work with a person with dementia, I think. The Lord's Prayer is a very, very powerful prayer, especially it's been used. You look in at your faith community, and especially you as family members, you know what the upbringing is. Try these things and see if they connect. And when they do, then you might just also share, I see that your faith means a lot to you. Because they may be trying to tell people that, but they can't use the words. But by them expressing it through these songs or prayers, that's what they're saying. They're making that confession. Personal devotional practices. This is a strong thing, too, for caregivers. This can be a very valuable time as you take that 10 minutes out of the day and to read a devotion or do some sort of reading, devotional reading together. It can be a very strong bonding experience. And I know especially if you're taking care of your family member in their home, you've got all kinds of other things you got to get done. There's all kinds of physical cares. There's the financial stuff you got to figure out. Where are they medically today? What are the appointments? You know what you're dealing with. And so it's very, very easy to overlook. But this can have the same effect as taking those 3 deep breaths. And you recognize that you're connecting to the Lord. You're not in this alone. Familiar Bible passages or objects, all of these things are there and are possible. I'm going to check the time here, and because I was going to do an activity, maybe we'll come back to it in the Q&A. But I'm going to describe it. It's really on the back page. It's sort of a worksheet for you. And it gets you to maybe go through a process of what you might try with a person that you're caring for in terms of the senses. What can you say? What can you put in front of them that they can see? What about objects that they might touch? What about taste and smell? Because if you look at the experiences that you have through your religious affiliation, there are also things that relate to taste and smell. If your church uses incense, is that something that would trigger a memory? Maybe you don't have that in the home, but maybe you could try that. There's the taste of the sacrament. Is that something that is there? Is there a food that is associated with a religious observance? Good Friday in our house, it was, some people do hot cross buns. We had noodles and prunes. It was to remind us of a cleansing. Okay? Maybe we'll come back to this. You can still teach people with dementia. And so maybe there is a key passage, a key phrase, or a key prayer. And with repetition, people can still bring that up. Remember, our memory works kind of with a you use it or lose it type of operation, isn't it? Which is why it's kind of scary as to how come we've become so dependent on our smartphones to keep all of our appointments and remember all of our stuff for us. Because people that don't have that in their culture have much better memory than we do in our society. And with dementia, I think sometimes if we can find something that is a good memory, the more we reinforce it, the more likely it's to continue as the dementia advances and other memories start to drop off. If there's a memory of a hymn, such as, again, Jesus Loves Me, why did Naomi choose it? Because it's a church song that gives Mrs. Wilson a sense of peace and safety. And wouldn't you want that to be something to be able to give all the way through the last stages of dementia? There's a story told, and again, I've got the details all messed up, but I think I've got the essence of it. I think it was a country western band, and they were asked, what is your best song? And they said, Silent Night. And this is a country western band. They spend a lot of their time in some really tough bars. And they said, why in the world would it be Silent Night? Well, they said, this is what we did as a band. Anytime we saw a bar fight starting to break out, and somebody taking a beer bottle and smashing it on the edge of the pool table, the band knew we got to play Silent Night. And it worked. It worked. People can't fight during Silent Night. So think about the power of that song for a bar, what it can do for your loved ones. Which is another thing I like to bring up, is that if, maybe the best song to use is a Christmas song, or is one associated with a holiday, but don't wait till the holiday comes around to use it. If mom doesn't know that it's June 3rd, it could be Christmas, right? Go ahead. So teach them. Keep it simple, lots of repetition. Look for any response and show that you recognize it, you're validating it, acknowledging what you see. This is an example of art, and Mindy has got more of this than I could possibly do, but we're using this in one of our facilities. People that it's okay, but people you saw at least got to see the picture. This was great.
We'll get there eventually.
Okay, but it works, and even people that have never been artistic get into it. Some of them do. And the neat thing about art is that often they'll tell you a story. There's going to be a story behind that butterfly. And so people that are nonverbal will actually start to talk about it because it's a slow process to develop what they're going to say. And then finally, I'm on page 10 there, provide emotional and spiritual support. How can family and friends help each other to provide this kind of support? And how can family and friends help the professional caregivers to provide it? My thought is you need to just approach it as a team. If something works, share it with the sisters, share it with the brothers in your family. If you've got a bedtime procedure that maybe includes a devotional or a prayer, and you're going to be gone, make sure that whoever is going to be tucking the person in knows about it. Because truthfully, that pattern can really help them to get settled down anyway, as a point. And as we start to transition from family to professional settings, what would be wrong with the family sharing with the facility, this is how mom goes to bed, and it includes a prayer. We can write it out. Now again, I think we have to be very sensitive that the staff has to feel comfortable with that, but maybe we can find a person in the staff that does. What would be wrong with including that? Because really, it's hard for people in a care facility to take care of the spiritual needs. Our facilities are faith-based, so we have chaplains, so it's actually understood. by our staff and residents that that's one of the things that we're going to do. Not every facility is set up that way. But how can we get together? How can, as a person tells their story, if the person doing the assessment would ask about not only what religion are they, but what are their religious practices? Are there some patterns that we can maintain? And can we, in a professional setting, also find a way to maintain that? Mrs. File is not a chaplain. She's not representing any faith. But she chose to reach Mrs. Wilson with her old church songs because she knew they worked. And if it's a way that we can provide comfort and care to an individual with dementia, maybe if we've kind of adverse to that in our settings, maybe that's something we could rethink. One of the other things I was going to do, just in case I had a bunch of pastors here, was to give them something. And this is in your packet. It's the Dementia-Friendly Church Top 10 Tips for Worship Services. This comes out of the United Kingdom. I think the Methodist folks over there put this together. But there's pages there on worship services, on prayer, on communication, dementia-friendly communities, buildings, all of those things. If you want to start a conversation in your faith community, maybe that's another thing to be doing, is to talk to your church leaders about how can we maintain a presence in worship services, or maybe even in the building for like a memory cafe or some sort of a support group. There's ideas in there. One of the things I think we can do better as faith communities is to support people with dementia. And what makes me excited about a day like today is that you are the leaders. You are the people that can start to bring this into communities because you get it. And you're learning to get it even more by listening to folks like Judy and Mindy.
Excuse me, Curt.
Yeah. If we can take this beyond this room into churches, and some churches, synagogues, and mosques are starting to do this, but to make this commonly accepted. And by doing that, we start to reduce the stigma that's attached to dementia and help the rest of the people that are not affected by the disease to kind of get it. Where are we? I think we're about time for Q&A.
If you'd like, Curt.
Am I early?
3:30, yeah, you've got a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, don't tell a pastor that he's got more time. Why don't we just go to Q&A?
Okay.
Are the mics around? And
They should be. I'll get my team out. Otherwise, we can, if you wouldn't mind just repeating questions. that'd be
Sure,
great.
sure. Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
My comment is we have to be careful because a lot of care facilities mold into this non-denominational thing. Everybody's welcome. And some people aren't comfortable with that at all. So you really need to understand what their individual needs are versus just pushing them because we're having chapel today. Because some people get very offended by that.
And you have to respect that. You have to respect, again, if people are communicating, I think it is important for activity to ask, would you like to go to chapel today? And really measure the response. Now, we have to be a little careful, too, that we don't say, well, you don't want to go to chapel today, do you? I mean, it's how you pose the question that makes a huge difference. But if it's obvious that either through the person's direct response or reading their face that they don't want to be there, we have to respect that. We have to respect that. And it may be that a person is very strong in their faith, they just don't want to go to a service of a different faith. And it isn't that they're rejecting any spirituality at all. It's just that that's what they, so you respect that, absolutely. Yeah. You want to go home, don't you? Well, I'm not going to let you. Let's go to that activity, if you would. And I'd like you to kind of group up, maybe groups of 4, 6. And I'm going to ask you to take about 5 minutes. And maybe, again, if you think in terms of sometimes the closest people are sitting right behind you. And think about different activities that might work. And if you can try to come up with at least one in the sense of hearing, one for the sense of sight, one for the sense of touch, one's for the sense of taste, one's for the sense of smell. And again, our topic is providing spiritual support. I think you could expand it to maybe generally emotional support. And what objects or what things might you be thinking of doing with, again, think of somebody that you're caring for that might work and that you're willing to try. So if you take about 5 minutes for doing that, and then I'm going to have our microphone folks go around and we'll get some responses for about 10 minutes. Okay? It'll be kind of a sharing. Okay, let's take about 1 more minute and we'll wrap up. Okay, let's share what you've come up with. And if in your group you'd sort of identify the person who might be willing to share the idea, and we'll have the two folks with the mic go up the aisles. We'll start, and if you can share about, let's share 3. Think about your best 3 ideas, or the unique ones, the ones that kind of caught your attention. And then as we go up, if this idea has already been shared, we don't need to repeat it. We'll just try to focus on the unique ones, and we'll all go home with maybe 15, 20 different things we never thought of. Okay, please start. Uh-oh, you're on the front, yep.
The spot, but for the hearing one, we were talking about how you talked about songs, especially just knowing that person's background and what they were, how they were raised, and because maybe not everybody's Christian, but if there's songs from their culture as a child that would bring up memories, or even prayers that they might have said as a child, or if even recorded family voices that would be familiar. I don't know if anybody would have that. Like I remember recording my dad and my mom talking about their upbringing, so that could be something that could be tapped into if we could find those voices from their past. And singing together as a group sort of helps bring people out.
Yeah, good. Thank you. We'll go to this side.
Oh, one of our ideas was kind of cross-cutting, so I put it in the category of more of an experience, like being in nature could, there are sights, there are sounds, there are smells. We talked about smelling even the lake, or so that.
Okay, good. Right over here.
We did talk about how there's also new things, trying new foods, and one member has been able to try new foods that they never ate before, and that was just enjoyable.
Yeah, good. Over here.
Well, I bake with my husband, and that, brings out the smell and the taste. And we talked about massage and using peppermint oil, and that brings out a beautiful smell too. And looking at old pictures and pictures of animals, and even just looking out the window at what's going on in the world.
Great, thank you.
For hearing, we talked about the use of poetry, or perhaps even if it's a small community and there were church bells that were, or in the Catholic faith or whatever church tradition, the use of bells in the service, those bells might be a good something to remind people. And the use of icons or pictures of churches or synagogues or
Yeah, thank you.
We talked about for touch, maybe incorporating something with their occupation,
Okay.
such as a mechanic, giving them something that they used. And for smell, we talked about the smell of, say, a grandmother's house or your own house that you grew up in, perfumes, flowers.
Okay, good. Over here.
For hearing, birds and storms, and also prayers. And for sight, again, birds, watching rainstorms, and a Harley Davidson sound.
There we go. For some people, that's a true spiritual experience, that Harley. Please.
For touch, we put down pet therapy, dogs, and we also have a little pony coming into our place for pet therapy, and then balls with different textures that they can touch and feel and throw to each other, and then art therapy.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We had sight. You have pictures,
Uh-huh.
but we also we know that because of oftentimes there's a visual field that's been narrowed.
Okay.
We want to make sure that the people that aren't eating, that we rotate the plate so they can look at it, to make sure that they're seeing what we're showing them. We assume they see it. Let's see if that brings and gets them more emotion from them.
Good, thank you.
We combined touch and hearing with like a group holding hands, family holding hands and praying the Lord's Prayer together.
There you go.
And also for taste, if they can still eat, doing communion.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Just on a spiritual level, I have a gentleman that's a Jewish man in our center, and he had the opportunity in an afternoon social over around Passover to do more of a traditional meal, and he had the opportunity to kind of express what that meant to him. So taste and sight, and it kind of incorporated a lot.
Right. I think we're back there.
Yeah, I think my team's picking on me. So I shared with everybody that I grew up with a pool table in the basement, and my dad lived and then passed away at the Veterans Nursing Home in Minneapolis. They had a game room with a pool table. Dad was wheelchair bound for 9 years after his stroke, and I would wheel him in there and put his hand on the pool stick, and we'd knock the balls around, and he got joy out of that. So it was both a touch and a hear.
Did he use the pool stick? He was able to do that? With your help. Or then sometimes you've got that little short one too, that might work. Yeah. Upstairs.
Upstairs.
Yes.
We have a picture of a painting of the church Mom grew up in the bedroom. So that's a visual.
Yeah.
Who would know donuts were spiritual? But I thought about this recently, and we're going to try it out. Glazed raised donuts. And what the basement church community tasted and smelled like.
Mm-hmm.
And
either very strong coffee or very weak coffee,
Weak.
depending on your denomination.
Definitely weak. Yeah. And then thank you for the talk, and the prayers was really strong whenever I'd go to Grandma's house. And I've neglected that for mealtime. So, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, but this helped connect the importance in the brain part of it.
And one more thing about prayer I didn't mention. It may not be in English. So, and for us living today, I didn't grow up speaking German, but my parents did. And so that may be the more vivid memory than the one I'm used to. Any others? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, one of our group members said that she had written down her mother's history in a small book, and it was available for whoever was in her, caring for her mother to read it, even if it was just sections or segments of, I imagine, segments of the story. Maybe a nursing aide had time just to read parts of it to her mother, and it was effective, is what I gathered from the story.
And that history could include, again, religious events, holidays, maybe a trip, maybe a pilgrimage. All of these things could be part of that, and that can be very, very meaningful and very powerful. I'm looking right in the light, so I'm not seeing.
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
My husband and I farmed for over 45 years. And now he just loves it when I drive the fields. We winter in Arizona, and then, of course, we're here in Minnesota in the summer. And we drive the fields in Arizona as well as in Minnesota. And he especially enjoys the aroma that comes from fresh mown hay.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Okay, any others? Don't want to. Oh. Okay, we'll take this the last one. Oh, two more. Go ahead.
My wife found a digital recorder. You open it, it plays. You close it, it stops. And we recorded my kids sang in choir in college, and we've got Elvis Christmas, stuff like that. She loves it.
Yeah.
This is off the topic, but your bit about original languages brought up a story for me of one of my grandmothers who was at a nursing home and had dementia the last few years of her life. And I was there with my dad, her son, and she had long ago stopped speaking English and was speaking Finnish. And I don't really know any of the language at all, except for a few bad words. But, you know, so she was going on, and I was just nodding and smiling while Dad had gone off to get her some coffee. And she had always been kind of a nature person, and she was sitting near a window looking out the window at the lovely spring day, and she just suddenly stopped and she said, "Wonderful world," in English, and then went back to speaking Finnish again. But it was such a gift.
That is a gift.
Yeah.
And it isn't that the great experience when you're there and now you remember it. And one of the things that you as caregivers are doing, you are teaching the next two generations how to take care of people. You think about this opportunity that you've got, and it's a high calling. Okay, is Joe around? Well, questions or comments? Let's just do that yet as we get Joe, and then we'll wrap up. Yes?
I think that the singing helps jog memories, plus it helps aerate the lungs and get people in a social setting to sing together. And a friend of mine has organized a choir in a memory care unit, and she says not all of them read sheet music, but she keeps it really simple, and it provides large print for them, and they have regularly scheduled concerts, and it works out really well. They feel a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment.
Just if you didn't hear, just the thought of singing and singing in choirs. Mindy mentioned one. What was the name? Some of you are in it?
The Giving Voice Chorus.
Okay. Was that featured on public radio a while back? Yes. Because there's another one in Orlando, Florida. And I think at the time I was down there, you up here and down there were the only ones in the nation. I got a chance to witness that. But as she pointed out, the aeration of the lungs as you sing, the social ability or the socialization that comes with it, the group dynamics, and the sense of accomplishment of what you can do. Yes?
One suggestion for caregivers, a weekend retreat, a weekend silent retreat at de Montreville at a Jesuit retreat house, wonderful therapy. And I believe there are similar retreats given in Buffalo, but a silent weekend retreat is led by a good retreat director is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Good, thank you. Yes, one more time.
Two simple words in southeastern Minnesota, southwest Minnesota, and northern Minnesota. Lutefisk and pasties. That'll get them going.
Yep. And that takes them right back to those seasons. Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just like noodles and prunes does for me. Okay, Joe, I'm going to just say two more things. I got a couple resources. The booklet there is, some of you have picked it up, it's on the table. My partner up there, Joel, is sort of manning that as you go out. Something I did about 5 years ago for the Lutheran home, and it was a tool I always wanted as a pastor. So if you find it helpful, I call it a primer. I covered, there's a devotional part of it, but then there's a lot of what you would, just basic description of how the disease works and living in people's worlds and that type of thing. I plowed really shallow and tried to cover a lot of ground, but giving people places where they can find other resources to drill down. And then we have a set of devotions that's also on the table, and I've got some more of those down here. We're putting out a series of these. If you'd be interested in that, get in touch with the Lutheran Home Association Foundation, or Lutheran, TLHA.org, not the foundation, but info@tlha.org. And we can get you on a contact list as those things come out. We're also working with IN2L, it's never too late, out of Denver. And I think they're going to start to post that on their machines. It's a computer resource, lots of things of activities on there. Some of the facilities may be using it. But on the spiritual side, there is going to be these devotions that can be downloaded and utilized as you see fit. Thank you. Curt?
Well, we're actually ahead of time and ahead of schedule. Thank you so much, Curt. I appreciate that. Well, that's it. Our 10th conference is over. We so appreciate all of your time and willingness to be here. As always, I can't ever do this conference without all of you. And I can't tell you how much I learn from you when I listen to your comments and thoughts, questions, complaints. So again, I really, really, really appreciate it. Final reminders before we adjourn for today. Again, please fill out your forms. I've mentioned this multiple times. Certainly, if you're interested in being part of our registry or our remote activity monitoring study, fill out the forms. You can just drop them off at the big box up front by the registration desk. And then if you've purchased CEUs, please see my staff at the front registration desk as well. I know many of you have been asking for additional copies of the handouts and such. I'll be emailing those to you in a follow-up email as well as posting all of today's presentations on YouTube and a DVD too if you'd like that as well. So again, everyone, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Curt.